Alright, welcome back. We're going to be picking our ancient era culture. I'm splitting this into its own video to talk about the cultures in humankind in general, while my cat says the word meow about 1,000 times. Here, come onto my lap, and then... Sorry, I don't have the cat cam. I couldn't find a good place to put it. I didn't get in the way. So, if you've seen the previous video, you'll kind of know how we got here. You'll know like what's going into our decision making. You'll know that we've got this beautiful waterfall that will give us some faith. But this is also kind of just intended for anybody if you want to send a video to say, here's how the cultures work in humankind. So if we click this more details card on the Carlons, you'll see that there are a symbol, this cooperative spirit, healers, and a plaza. So we're going to go through all these elements in turn for each of the cultures. So first off, all of the cultures are going to have a little icon, which it says the gameplay orientation. This is your affinity, okay? So the Carlons have the affinity builder. Now the affinities are going to take a lot of time for us to explain up front, but then there's only a small handful of affinities, and they're the same every era. Maybe the proportions of how many cultures of each affinity there are will change per era, but it's sort of the same ones. We've got to explain it once, and then we're done. This is called the legacy trait. The legacy trait is going to be a trait that permanently changes our civilization for the entire game. This is one of the very cool things of Humankind. You build a custom combination of 6 legacy traits that maybe nobody has ever chosen before, ever. Yeah. Then the unit. This is a special unit that you can build once you research it. Sometimes, especially in Ancient Era, you don't even need to research them. You just get them. Sometimes they have a tech. And you get to build these for sort of as long as they're relevant. So all of the units in Humankind are plugged into upgrade trees, which is where like you research a more modern version of the unit, then you can upgrade your older ones to the newer ones, and you can only build newer ones. So we can build the healers for some amount of time. And then finally we have the emblematic quarter. This is a special building that you can only build while you are that culture. So every culture is going to have these. A very special few of them might have 2 units and no building, or 2 buildings and no unit. But that's kind of like the baseline. So it's going to be a lot to take in up front, but the more you see, the simpler it'll be. So we're just going to get a lot of talking out ahead of us. So the Carlons here have a builder affinity. Now the affinity gives you some special actions and bonuses, and also you get more fame when building their star. So remember, like I said, we weren't going to talk too much about stars in the nomadic, where I got the growth star and the knowledge star. In a normal game of Humankind, you have stars based on doing civilization-y things, like building units, or winning wars, or getting influential. So in this case, if you build stuff, you get bonus points for building stuff as a builder affinity. You also get Landraiser mode. Landraiser lets you take all of your money and science shields, turn them into industry to build stuff very well. What I'm going to say is this is terrible in Ancient Era. It's very good once you've got quite a few cities. You kind of take one city and say, you, get modernized now. Build this wonder now. But when you've only got one city, having no money and no science, like, really sucks ass. So you're probably not going to use Landraiser in the Ancient Era. And then Pride, you gain taint stability when completing a construction. We're not going to get into stability until we have the city in front of us. It will make it much more clear how stability works. The thing to know about Pride is that your stability always tries to reach a certain equilibrium point. So the equilibrium is normally what matters. This just gives you 2 more turns before you reach equilibrium, because your stability will kind of reach its intended value at a value of 5 stability per turn. So Pride is not very important. Landraiser is quite cool, but not in our era. So being a builder is not a big thing. But our legacy trait is the cooperative spirit, which is basically whenever you've got a quarter, if it's touching another quarter of that same type, it's worth more. So the more farms you have together, like if I've got a triangle of 3 farms touching, and they all touch each other, then I get a bonus of 6 food, because each farmer's quarter gets +1 food for the other 2 adjacent to it. So Carlons can kind of like add up over time, but it's not that good early on, which is really what you want in an ancient civ. I'm not a big fan of cooperative spirit. The healers The healers are nice because they give health regen to all units even outside of their territories. So my nomads, you noticed, healed every turn after they got in deer fights. But once you become ancient, you only heal in your own land. So mixing in some healers really helps you explore further. And that is pretty good in our situation because we haven't found any other civilizations yet. So this lets us fight, bears and mammoths and then keep healing without needing to go back home. And finally, the Ceremonial Plaza. So allows construction of new districts and adjacent tiles. That is a little weird to explain, but basically, once we make a city out of our little guy here by Saw Angel, we can only actually build stuff in a circle around our starting outpost here. If we wanted to go and get some benefits for like touching the river over here, we would have to build a line of buildings all the way over there. But not with the Carlons. We can then just put a ceremonial plaza near coastal water or a lake and then get to build there. Is that good? Well, there's no lakes around here. We can build it here, but we're actually pretty close to the coast already. And the other thing it does is it kickstarts your early faith. You get faith per adjacent districts. Faith is quite hard to come by in Ancient Era. It gets easier in later eras. So that aspect would be good, except Salto Angel is going to give us 10 faith in our main plaza. Because it's just so religiously inspiring. It's like, damn, dude, you see how that water up there went down to the ground? Probably God did it. So, overall, Carlons are a big miss for me here. And you can see we're going to have a lot of these cultures to talk about. So this may seem kind of outrageously slow, but it's only going to happen once. And then as you play Humankind, surprisingly quickly, you'll be able to just kind of scan and be like, sure. And it's especially easy for us because there are these 7 cultures we're locked out of. I am going to still go over them for this video because this is intended to like teach new players. But that's another way to have an easier choice is to era up later. So, Pamanyungan. They are an aesthete culture. They receive more fame with aesthete stars. That's the stars you get for earning influence. They get the Cultural Blitz, which you get a territory into your sphere of influence, and you gain influence for adjacent territories already in your sphere. Influence is a very, very powerful currency, especially early on. The Cultural Blitz is very strong, especially strong in the ancient and classical eras. So that is already a really good argument for these guys. For ideological proximity is always maxed out. This basically means that other cultures we meet are going to feel more similar to us. So normally it is like, it takes the cultural choices you've made and it compares them to nearby civs. And like, if you guys have made a lot of the same cultural choices with your civics and stuff, it's more expensive to declare war because they're like, well, they're just like us. As an aesthete culture, you always feel just like the other civs, which is good as a defender and worse as an aggressor, because if you go to war with somebody similar, it costs more per turn. The people are less happy about it. Storied lands. +3 influence on landmark part, +5 influence on natural wonder. Guys, we have a natural wonder. Let me see if I can find a landmark part. It's easier with a map view that I will get access to starting next era to find a landmark part. But those are basically, you'll have like a special forest or a special river that will get a little name on the map. That's a landmark part. Don't think I see any of them nearby here. But we get the 5 influence per turn, and that's going to just be for the entire game starting the first turn. Because we'll have natural wonder in our borders. They've got boomerang throwers when you get carpentry. Ooh, they have expedition, which just like with the Carlons, lets me heal outside of my territory, which is really good for exploring around. And I don't take forest move penalties. So if I make an all boomerang army, then they can kind of explore faster. Now, as ranged units, they take a -8 when people get up in melee range. So positioning, you have to be quite careful. You can see the icons there are combat strength, movement, range, and sight range. They have a range of 2. So they have to avoid melee combat, but they only have one more range than that at 2. So positioning them is tricky, but it's a pretty good unit. And then their emblematic quarter is the fish trap, which you put on the river, and it gives you food per adjacent rivers. We are on the river here on Althafar, so fish trap could go right down here. So these guys be quite good right now, and that's kind of what I do. I scroll through the cultures and I look for who is kind of out, like the Karlans. They just don't give me anything I want. Pamanyangan, they're in. I would be happy with them. Let's see what else we got. Well, we have the Assyrians. They're an expansionist culture. So that is, expansion is when you attach territories outside of your own influence. They're going to get more fame for that. They also have under one banner, which you target an administrative center or an outpost with your army to add it to your empire if you're not interrupted. So basically, to understand under one banner, you need to understand ambition, the one below, which is you can always trespass. So normally, you're going to have dotted lines like this one for stuff that you are half laying a claim to, like I'm laying this half claim to this outpost. Once I make this a city, this is going to be a solid border. You have to have an open borders treaty with me to be in there without trespassing, right? But as an Assyrian, you can always trespass because you're expansionist. And so, you often want to go to war for people nearby you to take their territory, but you can also just trespass. That lets you go in, but it doesn't let you take territory. But aside from the city center, under one banner does let you take territory. You stand on the administrative center, and you sit your army down, and you take it. So, is under one banner useful? Mostly no, because mostly if you want to go to war, you can find a reason, right? They found a territory near you, you demand it. They adopt a different religion, you say they're oppressing your people, that sort of thing. But sometimes you will have an opponent who is sort of assiduous about not giving you a reason, very deferential and careful. And that's when under one banner can be really good, because if you've got a big military edge over your opponents, you don't need to declare war to start taking their land with under one banner. So I'd say you don't use it much, but when you need it, it's really happy to have it, because it's when you can't get the war score, but you still have an advantage and you still want some territory. Their trait is Raid Masters. +1 land movement speed on unit. That's just insanely great. Movement speed is king. It's always really nice. I love Raid Masters. And then combat strength bonus when ransacking. Ransacking, it's like what we're doing now to the sanctuary here. It's when you take something for resources. The ransack strength determines how fast it's going to go off, which matters a lot, because the sanctuaries only took 1 turn, but players' stuff are going to take longer. So Raid Masters is pretty good, but we don't know of any other civs near us yet. We have no idea who the closest guy is. And going Assyrian if you're alone on the continent, I mean, that +1 movement speed is going to help me scout better, but that's not that. You definitely pick them when you're planning to fight. Because you also can get the Assyrian Raiders, who give you +10% bonus money when ransacking. And they're cavalry. They can't climb fortifications, which means if you're attacking an enemy city, you need something better than a horse that can go inside. But you can also see 21 strength. The healers are only 16, and the boomerangs are 18. And if these guys got in range of the boomerangs, which they can probably do, because they have 6 movement speed, and they ignore enemy zones of control, since they're a cavalry, well, then these guys are going to take their -8, and it's going to be 21 to 10. And to give you an idea, remember how big of an advantage it was to fight from the high ground, which is a difference of +4. So, Raiders are really strong. You can see at the bottom here, you need to have 4 horses, okay? Now, normally, when you are planning your next civ, you get situations like this. You see this unknown strategic resource with the little question mark? I don't know which resource that is. It's going to be for one of the eras. If it is iron, the classical resource, then when I reach the classical era, it's going to reveal itself as iron. And so you kind of have to know how many resources do I have in my lands, what are the chances that I'll be able to pay for my new special unit. For specifically going Neolithic to Ancient, To make the game a little easier, they identify the horses and the copper up front. And we see we've got a deposit of exactly 4 horses who are scared of the mouse. Run away, run away. So, we would be able to build Assyrian raiders once we made an outpost here, researched domestication, and started extracting our horse extractor here. So, we could build the raiders. We don't have any enemies yet. And their emblematic quarter is the Danu, which gives influence. That's good. Flood influence. +2 combat strength in combat for units in or adjacent to the district. So, to kind of paint a picture for you, if I found another civ like here, down here, they were threatening on us, then maybe I start thinking, okay, well, here's my city. Well, what if I sneak a Danu, let's say, right here. Let's pretend for a second that there's another wall here. If I put a Danu here and stand there, then for when he attacks me, I get a +2 for my unit in it and adjacent to it. That's a big deal in combat. So if I had a close-by enemy, Assyrians would look quite tempting, especially with this 4-horse deposit, which is exactly as much as I need. Because I don't see them, I think it's still solidly below Humankind. Egyptians. 1 industry on tile-producing industry. 10% cheaper districts. Simple, straightforward, love it. Grand planners is never bad. Some of the cultures in this game have a pretty high floor, where I do think the balance it has gotten pretty good in the sense of there aren't always like super dominating cultures. Most of the cultures always have a few times where they're at least kind of useful, even if it's rare. But there are these kind of nice bread and butter cultures that are never wrong. You're never wrong to pick Egyptians, okay? That's the story here. Some of these other cultures, like the Karlans, you could be wrong to pick Karlans, not get really anything out of it. But you're never going to be wrong to pick Egyptians. It's always going to be fine. There will be better. I think Palmanian might still be better for us. But it's never wrong. And those are really good cultures to gravitate to if you're just starting out the game and this is really overwhelming. Like if you get to Ancient, you're the first one. Which, by the way, I forgot to say this. I'm playing on Humankind difficulty. On the lower difficulties, all of the AIs will sit patiently in the Neolithic era and wait for you. So you get to have the culture you want. Which is very nice to learn, but if you get to the screen, you're like, oh my god, there's too many pictures and I'm crying. Click on the Egyptian. They build buildings better. You're going to build buildings no matter what. Now it's better. Congratulations on your Egyptians. Have a nice day. So, Grand Planners, love it. Super strong. 10, because the +1 is good early on, which is when you want it, and minus 10% scale, so that's good the entire game. Perfect combination, you know. Cookies and cream. I didn't need to go over their benefits because they're another builder culture like the Karlans, which remember, builders are less good in Ancient, which is fine for Egyptians because their legacy trait is really good, so it doesn't matter that you're not using Landraiser. Their unit is the Markabata, 24. Okay, remember the Karlan Sealer, 16? The Boomerang Thrower, 18? 24 on the Markabata. It's strong. It might be the strongest. I don't remember for sure. It's strong as hell, and they can do a full move after making an attack with Move and Fire. Move and Fire is really good, because a situation that'll come up pretty commonly when you're doing a battle is that there's like this one perfect overlook, like the one best spot to shoot from. And if you've got an army of 4 archers, then one of your archers takes the best spot, one archer takes the second best spot, your third archer takes the third best spot. If you've got 3 Markabatas, then the Markabata goes to the best spot, shoots, moves away. Your second Markabata goes to the best spot, shoots, and moves away. The third one goes to the best spot, shoots, and moves away. 1 tile of high ground means your whole army has high ground. Now you'll notice that the downside for the Markabata being cracked is it costs 8 horse and 5 copper. So we would not have either of enough of those right now. We would have to go get copper from here, horse from here, and look for some more horse. So that's the downside. We couldn't make the Markabata. Then the pyramids gives you influence, industry per adjacent maker's quarter, and it counts as maker's quarter. This is something, I probably should have talked about this back with the Karlans. We'll talk about it now. Most emblematic quarters can only be built once per territory. It's a pretty set rule. There's a few exceptions, I think, but by and large, once per territory, that's all you're getting. So, +2 industry per adjacent maker's quarters means two things. Number one, it means if you get normal maker's quarters later, then you put them by the pyramids and they still do better. Because you can build an unlimited number of maker's quarters with only one pyramid. But also, what's very important is to think about your borders. So, we have Alfar, and we have Citadeli. And you can see we have this. Let's say we want to get designs on this one to get this little triangle. Then one pyramid per territory means we can put one pyramid here, one pyramid here, one pyramid here, and they can all give each other a +2. That's really relevant with the Carlons, who give all of your buildings forever, that kind of adjacency thing. But you can see here with the Egyptians, that's a benefit. But remember, we can only build the pyramids touching Alfar. So right now, we could not pull off that kind of adjacency. What we could do is I could build a farmer's quarter here, build a pyramid, let's say here. Then, if I found my city down here, if I put the outpost in one of these, I could put a pyramid here and we'd get them touching. So that's a sort of city building thing to consider. It can be pretty effective on the margin to get these nice adjacencies, but you don't need to worry too much about it. I'm just letting you know it's sort of something. So, Egyptians are good because I can't build the Markbata. And this is just a really good initial offer, the Palmyungan. We're going to still, I think, prefer that, but never wrong. Pick Egyptians. Hittites have militarist. So, you get more fame for militarist stars, or just killing units. You get the iron reserves. You make a full militia. It consumes pop. It says 0. This is a tooltip thing because right now I don't have, I'm not ancient, so I can't possibly raise a militia. It's usually 4. You get rid of up to 4 population from your city. You turn them into militia, which are units that are usually below the curve. Although sometimes if you've just finished researching a militia technology, it might be better than your main units even. And it's also just a button for free units. Very powerful in wars. And you can even upgrade them into normal units later if you need to. And then you have Vigilance, which is +30 war support. This is also very powerful. So the idea is normally, I was telling you with the Assyrians, that as an expansionist civilization, you can kind of get into these areas where you can't get enough war support. Well, war support's equilibrium normally is 50. Having a war just finish or something like that can drain it down, or losing in one. Having grievances that are kind of not being addressed each turn, or demands, makes it go up. If you get to 80, you can declare a war. You can always do a surprise war. You don't normally want to, though, because it gets you in a lot of international hot water, and everyone is sort of allowed to gang up on you. So, assuming you're trying to avoid surprise wars, which you usually are, you want a justified war. But as a militarist civ, your equilibrium goes up by 30, which means in the normal case, you have an equilibrium of 80, which is what you need to declare war. So basically, once you've spent enough time as a militarist civ, you can just declare a justified war on anybody, because you're people. So, very, very powerful affinity bonuses. Assuming you've met another civ, which right now we have not. Lust for War, +1 combat strength on unit. Short, sweet, to the point. It's a meaningful +1. Not amazing, not the biggest, but it's meaningful. And then also, +20 food, industry, money, and science on each owned city per occupied city. So, that's a little bit weirdly framed. Let's say I've got 2 cities, then each one of those cities is going to get 20 food for each city I occupy. So if I'm in a 2v2 war with another civ, or when I say 2v2, I've got 2 cities, they've got 2 cities, I take over one, I get +40 science, money, food, and industry until I take their other city, then I get 1 turn of +80, and then probably the war is over, I surrender, I accept their surrender, it goes away. But that can be really cool, that getting surcharged with the Hittite benefit for taking a city can be really nice. Their guy is the Giger, kind of like the Markbata, very expensive for horses and copper, but it's heavy cavalry, and it suppresses them so they can't move, which can be really nice to stop any annoying hit and run. The Awari. Now, the Awari is a bit strange. So when it says replaces regular outpost, what that means is that, okay, I'm going to build this into my city on my first turn. Then I'm going to have the one here in Citadel. That's going to just become an Awari for this whole era. So when you replace the outpost, on the one hand, you get the benefit of not needing to build your emblematic quarter at all. You just get Awaris for free instead of outposts. They give you 3 money a turn each. They give you district fortification, which is a wall that makes it harder for people to fight you. And you get health regen in that territory. And neighbor cities can spawn land units from it. So just a huge suite of tactical benefits on the Awari. The downside is, because this is just upgrading my outposts, as soon as I become Classical Era, which is the era after Ancient, I lose all my Awaris. They're just gone forever, and that's it. So I don't get to have any... Whereas the Egyptian pyramids, I won't be able to build any more, but I'll get them for the rest of the game. Anytime I put a new Maker's Quarter from a new Builder Civ next to them, I'll get that +2. The Hittite Awari gives me all these cool benefits for fighting, but then when I hit Classic, they're all just gone. So again, kind of like the Assyrians, maybe even more so, the Hittites are all about, there's an ancient era war and I want to win it. I don't know where any other civs are yet. It's not the best idea to pick Hittites. The Zhou are another aesthete culture. They have Harmonious Thought, +2 stability on district. Again, stability will make much more sense when we have a city to look at. I'm not going to go into too much detail. Basically, know that the average district gives you -10 stability. So this giving +2 on district means 20% of the normal penalty is nullified. So your cities can get about 20% bigger. The Zash has 8 horse, very, very expensive, but it's a heavy cavalry with the Mandate of Heaven, so it's 26, and it's even stronger when stability is high. So I think I was wrong about the Markbata. I think it is, in fact... Yes, I think that is the strongest unit in all of Ancient Era, is the Zash, and it gets even stronger as long as you're stable, which you probably will be as the Zhou. Confucian School gives you +5 science per adjacent mountain. So this is one of the biggest terrain dependencies in the Ancient Era, is if you happen to have a good mountain range, you can really benefit from the Confucian School. And you can see Salto Angel is 2 tiles of mountain. That's a woodland. You see I'm looking down in the corner there? So man, I could put a Confucian School right here and get +10 for having 2 mountains. Unfortunately, my city center would have to move, which it does only cost 12 influence to relocate the outpost. I should have talked about that earlier. So if I were to go Zhou, then I would relocate the outpost here, except the food penalty, so I could put the Confucian School right here. That would look insanely cool. -12 is not the most worth it. And these are stone fields, these are not mountains. This is a mountain. So right here, okay. So if I took the Zhou, hold on. If I scoot this guy right here, and I put a Confucian School here, this is touching 4 mountains right here, right? Mountain, 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 mountain. If I put a Confucian School right here, I get 20 science per turn from that. That is a cracked amount of science early. You're going to see I'm going to start with 5 science a turn or something. That Confucian School is really good. If you're wondering about the kind of weird number 8 stability here, it's because Harmonious Thought is going to make it worth +2 more. So normally a normal district is -10. This is +8. So that Confucian School plus Harmonious Thought means I'll get +10 stability for building it. Which is good, because normally building a emblematic quarter makes you worse. So now I've got 2 really good options, right? And they're both the aesthetes, which are very strong abilities in the Ancient Era. I could get the 5 a turn forever, and the fish traps, which are a food district on river when I've got good river action. in both of my starting spots. I could go Zhe to have one amazing Confucian school here, one that is okay, but also looks cool as hell right here. At the base of the waterfall have the school. So, which one do I want? Well, I could make the boomerang throwers as soon as I get carpentry. The Zashes, I need 5 copper, 8 horse. I can get 5 copper just by taking this land, but then I would need to like get this horse and find some more. Or, sorry, I should have mentioned, this is a new change, so I just misspoke because I'm not used to it. I can make the Zash without having all the horse, but the fewer horse I have, the longer it's going to take to build. But I could, with this stuff, still build one. It would just take longer. So, I honestly don't know where to go. And something that I do know, and something that you often pick, is if you lose some culture picks because you were behind, you know that these cultures are in the game. I know the 7 other players I could find. So now we're going to go over these, not only because this is like a general video to teach you about the cultures, but because I can also look at these and decide, knowing that these are the worlds I'm in, would I rather be Pamanyungan or would I rather be Zhe? So the Babylonians are a science culture. They get more fame for getting text. They can get collective minds. This is like Landraiser, but for science. And as you can imagine, it is bad in Ancient Era, like Landraiser, for exactly the same reason. In the same way that, damn, having no industry and money in Ancient Era sucks, damn, sitting in the Ancient Era saying I'm literally not building anything is, like, terrible, unplayable, right? You do it and you're just going to have one little scientist, like, blazing through the tech tree, like, I understand exactly how that guy is going to kick my ass. And I can't build any units until I turn this stupid shit off. So, collective minds, very, very good in later era stages of the game. When you can stand to have one city just pumping out the science, not very good early on. Foresight is quite nice. +1 era available to research means that normally I'm ancient. I can research all the ancient era technologies. I have to go classic to research classic technologies. And actually, ancient era is probably the worst for this, where there's not so many technologies. You can quite easily research all of them. In fact, it's very likely to happen if I go the Zhou route, because the Zhou give me science for their emblematic quarter. It counts as a research quarter, but as it happens, I'm an aesthete culture, not a science culture. So once I get all the ancient sciences, it's done. Babylonians, they're going to be able to just slide right on in and research classical stuff while they're in ancient without wasting any of that. So foresight is really good, especially there's a few key texts we're going to end up pointing on throughout the game that you really need to be mindful of as you upgrade. And being able to skip one of these cult texts for an era is, like, really sick. The Sabu Sakat, I have no idea how to pronounce those diacritics, so I'm not going to... You're going to notice I play it very fast and loose with pronunciation in this game. There's too many words. So they've got 22 anti-cav, stronger on a friendly district. It is so annoying. These guys are defensive monsters. It's so annoying to fight an offensive war into the Babylonians because of them. I think it's +2 or +4 for Guardian. It's a lot. And we do have the 5 copper. But again, we can't pick the Babylonians. So it's whether or not we want these is sort of a lost dream. Then the astronomy house is kind of this interesting thing where it is a research quarter that also counts as a farmer's, and you'll get food per researcher. So it's a bit of a gimmick. It's not amazing. It's basically just saying, look, guys, we know that building a pure science building in the ancient era is hard. So for the Zhou, you get at least the benefit of knowing that this is going to give you a shitload and it is plus stability. And then for the Babylonians, it's like, well, we're going to give you some food on top of it so you can actually stand to do this. Normally, research quarters, they're just not the easiest to build early. There's so many other things you've got to get started on your civilization. Montu, another expansion civ. They have harmonious amalgamation, influence per number of adjacent empires on territory. Now, on territory, remember, a territory is one of these dotted line guys. So if you're in like a big scrum with a lot of territories, that really adds up. Because it's not just +2 for every empire that you're touching as a civ. It's each of your territories gets plus for each of the empires that territory touches. So if you're kind of in a fight club, especially if you're a player who likes to play a Pangea map where everyone's together on one continent, that can be a lot. But their unit, the Bagandi Pioneers, have Nomad. Which, remember I told you, as soon as we upgrade to Ancient, we're not going to have Nomad anymore. We're not going to multiply with food unless you're Bantu. Similarly, their normal outposts, they can't go make normal outposts. They make these Mupa fields which feed the nearby cities. What I will say is, as a new player, don't play Bantu. Okay? Bantu, you play this weird different game where you say, hey guys, you notice how in the Neolithic you can kind of exponentially accelerate your number of people by going and founding all this stuff? Well, what if you got to do that all throughout Ancient Era without saving it for Neolithic? Right? It's interesting. It can be strong sometimes, but it's so different from normal Humankind to play the Bantu that you just shouldn't when you're starting out. Because it's kind of a weird thing where you just Neolithic but more. Harappans are... First off, fun trivia. Harappans used to be almost impossible to take because of a bug with the AI where their runners don't need any copper or horse. And as it happens, the AI code used to strongly preference getting an emblematic unit it can make, but it wasn't counting the potential horses and copper they could found, only what they have. Since you can't possibly have any horses or copper in the Neolithic, it would just always try to take Harappan for the runners. Another interesting thing is that in competitive multiplayer, which I do not play, I think Humankind is well balanced for a Civ game, but Civ games are just not what you should play for competitive human... I mean, Through the Ages is a Civ game, I guess, but like that kind of board gamey type thing is, I think, what you want for competitive and not a game like this. From what I hear, if you're going to play competitive, these guys are the strongest because religion in this game is about the number of worshippers, sort of times... The number of faith determines which faith they're going to follow when they get made, and then population is how many people in that territory have that faith. So the Harappan food lets you snowball into more food, lets you snowball into religion. Tangent over. I don't know why I did that. The Agrarian Civ, you get more fame for having more people. This counts in cities and in military units. Okay, Greener Pastures. You get a single population from every adjacent foreign territory to the city. And you also just get one consolation prize population for free. And you also gain 5 stability when gaining pop. That's not that big of a deal, the community. That's a small thing. Greener Pastures is like, influence is so valuable early on, it's quite hard to spend it on Greener Pastures. Having said that, if you're in a war, you need to have a population to make a military unit in this game. You kind of can't pull them out of the ground, right? Like you're like Saruman making the Uruk-hai. You need to actually have a person to make a soldier. So Greener Pastures can be pretty nice when you're on aggressive terms with a neighbor because you get the potential to make more units, you take some from there. Spending influence on it is quite hard when you think of what else you can spend influence on. It's a pretty mid affinity overall. But the Harappan Legacy trait, Fertile Inundations, +1 food on river, +1 food on tile producing food, that's quite good. We've got lots of rivers. You want to found on rivers early game because they're really useful, and this gives you extra rewards. The runners are also worth noting because they're very weak, right? We're looking at like some 22s, 23s. These guys are just 14, and they just have Pathfinder, which is not combat relevant. But what's good about the runners is that your basic tribes people upgrade into runners if you become Harappan. Normally they just become, I think they're called scouts. So if you've got a lot of nomads, then going Harappan gives you a quick buff of power relative to all your neighbors. Especially if you've been playing the Neolithic anywhere where you've got a lot of units. Because they all become runners at once, and then suddenly you've got strength. And then their emblematic quarter is the Canal Network, which is just food per adjacent quarters, but it still counts as a river. So when you've got stuff that gives you benefits per rivers, it sort of counts that canal network again, which can be really nice. So When you've got a big long river like this, this is just some random guy. But like when I'm like this, Harappans would have been a strong contender if they were an option because of those benefits. Mycenaeans, another militarist civ. They have minus 20% unit industry cost. Not so good early on, but it scales throughout the game a lot better than the Hittite +1 strength. And you get a little bit of experience making them. But their unit, the Prometoi, he's pretty cool. If you don't have any resources, he's still 21 strength. And he's stronger in the first round. Which, if you are on the offense, then you can just break enough of the enemy's units with Champion that it doesn't matter if they've got a slightly stronger unit if you send in a lot of Prometoi. So, very good unit, especially if you're strategic starved. And then they make the Cyclopean Fortress, which has the District Fort and the combat strength. It's a Maker's Quarter and a garrison, and the movement for hostile armies gets increased. So, unlike the Hittites, who give you the Awaris right away, but they go away, you build a Cyclopean Fortress and you get to keep it. So it's kind of that same logic as the Hittites, where you build them when the enemies are close and you've got to get some sort of strength. But the Mycenaeans, if you think it's going to be like a protracted, like you want to hold a choke point, like let's say that I had this, and then this all came down to a single tile choke point. Like, I start with like 7 territories that all come down to like, or a 3-tiling, let's say a 3-tile choke point. Well, I can put a fortress in the middle of that choke point, and then I'm so annoying. I want that kind of thing the whole game. So, it's sometimes a little tricky to decide Mycenaeans or Hittites. They're kind of similar. If you have no horses or copper anywhere in sight, and you've got a nasty neighbor, like if you're really behind, then Mycenaeans are a great way to kind of say, all right, let's do it. Let's bring it on. The Nubians, these were the first ones picked. They are a merchant culture. So you get more money you get more fame for having more money. You have Power Investor, where you can build an extractor instantly or share a sum of money with the owner. This is normally just like influence for money, which sometimes is good and sometimes isn't. Influence is generally a little more valuable earlier on, but money can sometimes let you like sneak out a unit because you can buy units with cash or something like that. And it's also really helpful if you've got a technologically behind or like developmentally behind ally, because you can force them to just build the extractor so you can trade with them for it if you really want their resource. Especially with mediation, where if you don't have a trade treaty with other empires, you can still get their resources. Now, I don't actually remember off the top of my head. I think this still gets cut off with a war, because war just sort of stops trade. But if your opponents say, I don't want to trade with you, but I'm not ready to go to war, with mediation, you can just still trade with them and make money, which is good because you get the Golden Dreams on the Nubians. You really want to get all the deposits for more money per turn. The Tasseti Ulchers, which is historically, that's just where you go to get archers. They don't need a clear line of sight, which is really nice. They're just really strong. And the Mero Pyramids, in the same way that the Babylonian science thing needed to have food, because in Ancient, it's really hard to build something without any food or industry, unless it's like super cracked, like the Zhou Confucian school. Similarly, this is like their money thing that still is also a maker's quarter. It gives you the 2 industry, and it gives you money when you build adjacent maker's quarters. So that's just a cute little thing. So overall, the Nubians, if you've got tons of deposits, which honestly, we're not bad for deposits. You can see once we start taking all this stuff, we're going to be like boom, 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 boom. Lots of deposits. So, boom, boom. So we wouldn't have minded the Nubians in that sense. The Olmecs, the third athlete civ, they're a lot more simple, just +3 influence on territory. This is a snowball, which reminds me I never talked about the Babylonian legacy trait, because that's also a snowball. That's every time you research a technology, you get +2 science per turn forever. Similarly, Olmecs give you +3 influence per territory, and influence is what you use to get more territories, which then gets you more influence a turn, etc. The unit is the javelin thrower, who ambushes on forest tiles. If you get them on forest tiles, they're pretty tough. Otherwise, kind of the same as the boomerangs of the Palmanyungans, having the negative penalty for being in melee, but only range 2, means you've got to be pretty careful where you stand. But if you do, then oh boy. The Olmec head is influence and food. So, again, influence, science, money, it's all tends to come with food or industry attached to it in the ancient era, so you can survive. And the final culture are the Phoenicians, another merchant. They are trading pioneers, which gives them benefits to their naval unit, and they get access to the Byreme, which is a naval transport unit. So, you need to have an embarkable unit, like this supplants units on Embark, to be able to go in the water. This takes a technology that is normally classic. But the Phoenician Byremes show up when you research fishing in the ancient eras. So Phoenicians get to take to the water the soonest, and they get the bonus strength and movement speed on their naval units and transports. So if you are starting on an island, you need to pick the Phoenicians. I did continent spawn, so it wasn't really a worry, but depending on your world gen settings, if you see something really good on the other side of the coast, or if you just notice that you are on a small landmass, Phoenicians are the way to get out in the ancient era. So that's when you pick them. Their harbor, their special unit is a harbor, which gives you money for adjacent coastal waters and lakes, while still counting as a farmer's quarter and still exploiting food. Also worth noting about harbors, and actually, not actually, but with harbors, is that you can build harbors once you've researched them with influence. Because the game lets you build stuff with influence that is tactically really necessary. So I can't go and build Maker's Quarters in Citadel while it's not a city or attached to a city. But once I research harbors, I can build its harbor. Once I research extractors, I can build its extractors. So having an emblematic harbor is really good, because then you can use influence to buy the havens, which means it's easier to get a lot of them. So Phoenicians are very much for the use case of I want the Byreme. It's got this other stuff too, but the Byreme is sort of what you take them for. So that is the kind of rundown. I see 45-minute rundown. But hopefully that gives you an idea of when you're picking a culture in Humankind, what you think about. And I'm going to have to go on this level of detail for every era, but I won't have to go over the affinities. It's all going to be the same affinities with the same affinity abilities. It will just be new combination, new legacy traits, new units, new buildings. And for us in this run, we have 2 very strong contenders of the Palmanyungan to get that 5 influence a turn forever and build the fish traps, and the Zhou to build the Confucian schools. And I think I'm going to go with the Zhou with the logic that I can show you that I can just spend this 12, get it in a spot where it can... Oh, that's -6 food. That's so much food. If I want the Confucian school. I mean, that's going to look so cool, though. Right? I guess I could do it here and then build one other district here and then build the school. Yeah, that's probably what I'll do. There we go. And then this one. So we're going to want to put... This is where we want the Confucian school to go on this one. Remember, we can build 1 Confucian school per territory. So we're going to sneak this guy here. So take these negatives. Now, you can see that this would have been... I would have got to save a lot of this precious influence had I been thinking about my culture in advance. But of course, for the video's sake, or I want to do these long explanations, that doesn't work. So we're going to click the adopt and confirm it. And now we're going to get a cutscene.
Perhaps you don't really need to focus on markets when you have
so that you can watch that cutscene on your own time.
Chariots.
We have the game. And now we are the show. We can found our first city. And I'm going to explain all of that in another video so that this is just the ancient era cultures. But if you want to see ancient era play, do stick around.